Let's start. So, welcome back. Welcome to week 6. Now, as I said, week 6, we're really moving into kind of the second half of the mentorship now. We're really diving into the depths of things. So, we really have started at the beginning of it. We've begun to create the foundations of your yoga business. And now we're really talking about deepening it, but also giving you the tools that you need to really walk forwards with this because we've got the practical stuff down. Now we want the really action based, in depth stuff. So that is where we're coming from after the 5th week, coming into the 6th week. And for this week's session, we are really diving into one of my favorite topics, which is the importance of energy within your business. And this is something that not very many people talk about, but I categorically will say that it is the reason things happened for me the way they did. Right. And when I first started my yoga business, things did actually happen relatively quickly. And I'm convinced this is why, right? Because the energetic side of it is something I really focused on because I didn't really know what else to do at the time. So I thought I'd try it. I had nothing to lose, but actually it can really, really change so, so much. And that is why I'm really excited to chat to you guys about it. But it's also why it is so important within your business as well. So diving straight in with energy in your business, and we've spoken a little bit about energy already with our time together. We spoke a little bit about how energy works for you as a yoga teacher, how it works when you're trying to work with other people's energy, and how we use energy, right, to resonate with our students, to bring the vibration up within the room. Now, this energy can also be used when we are talking about just simply the way we run our business. And the first thing I really want to say, and this is where a lot of I think newer yoga teachers or people creating their businesses in yoga or anything actually kind of tend to go wrong. And it would be a real crying shame to replicate the sort of energy and the force and the grittiness that you probably have in any jobs you've worked previously, maybe your current job. It would be a crying shame to recreate that in your yoga business and create something that leads to burnout and create something that feels stressful and something that doesn't feel enjoyable, right? But for so often and for so many of us, we that's all we know, right? We've worked in a certain environment and that is the only way we know how to work. And that is really what we want to talk about here because my aim for you is not to have you burnt out and exhausted, no longer loving yoga, because that actually does happen so often to so many teachers because they're trying to put it into sort of this parameter of what they think they should be doing and how much they think they should be working or how many studio classes they need to be doing to make the amount of money they want to. And that is, first of all, not the only way. And I don't think it's the best way, right? And this is where we really need to shift the mindset in and around your business. So I kind of want to walk you through the two philosophies around business. Now, we have the more masculine way of running a business, of running yourself as a freelancer, of being self employed, and we have the more feminine way. I'm going to walk you through the more masculine way, and this is probably something you'll recognize, and then you'll be able to see the contrast with the more feminine way, right? So, when we think of the masculine way of working, there is a very set schedule every day. There is a feeling that if other people are working, I should be working too. There is a constant need to be seeking more. There is a feeling of I need more, constantly reaching for more, constantly striving for more. This isn't always bad. Remember, the masculine is not a bad quality, it has its place, but this is just on 100% masculine business, right? There is a really consistent every single day I need to show up as my best, right? Because for men, they can do that a lot easier, just due to hormones and things like that. So, other things within the masculine businesses, there is an element of forcefulness there in terms of marketing, which you may have actually experienced. So, when you see like marketing and it's really in your face and the bright colors, or not necessarily the colors, but people are jumping into your DMs and are sending you things and trying to get you to buy something, right? And just completely out of the blue. That's very masculine, although I get emails every day trying to sell me something, from just someone who's self-employed, right? So that is a very masculine business there. There's also a feeling of if other people are working, I need to be working twice as hard as them. There's a real feeling here of constantly striving for more. And there is an undertone of sometimes lack, right? So there's this feeling that there isn't enough and I constantly need to be striving for more. And Yes, there can be a beautifully divine masculine business, but this is the way in which we see a lot of masculine businesses being run these days. And that's just the way the world is. We live in a quite a masculine society, and this is the way that quite a lot of businesses are structured, which is fine. You know what? If you're working in finance, fine, absolutely fine. However, and this is where a lot of people feel like business and yoga don't marry up, because that way of business is very hard to incorporate into yoga, right? Because yoga is inherently very balanced, right? Yoga is about union. It's not about this really strong side of everything being here, right? It's not about this. There's also a level of removal from the business as well when you're in that more masculine side of, well, if it happens, it happens, whatever, right? Or if I have to hurt someone's feelings, it's fine. That's very masculine side of the business. And also, there is an element of you need to protect yourself first, but I think we get the idea. This is the masculine side. And there is an element of lack. There is an element of forcefulness. There is an element of a lot of doing. The energy of that is very, very doing energy, seeking, getting, going out and taking, right? Which is fine. It's not wrong. However, it is, as I said, quite challenging to marry up with the yoga side of things. And I'm sure you will have heard people say that they find it really hard to marry up yoga and business. I can't say it's my favorite thing to hear people say, but something you must remember is that understanding business and yoga, it needs to be an equal thing. We have so many people in the yoga industry. It's a bit of a tangent, but I will say it. There are so many people in the yoga industry that do not have this balance. You either have the masculine businessman, whether it be woman or man, the masculine businessman who comes in and has no idea about yoga, or you have the yogi that has no idea about business and lets everyone walk all over them, or is spiritually bypassing everything and not paying people fairly because they think that, oh, it's karma yoga, it's fine, right? And we see this all the time. So I'm going to pre-warn you, you are going to encounter these characters throughout your journey as a yoga teacher all the time. And this is why it's so important to empower you guys to have both, because you can have both. And everyone should really have both, right? So that is your more masculine side. Now, let's think about the more feminine side of a business, okay? Now, bear in mind, this may be very, very different to what you have experienced before. Now, the more feminine side of the business is very, very connected to whatever it is that they are selling, sharing, whatever it is their job is, they're very connected to it. There is an element of not needing to outwardly seek or grab or go towards something. Instead of constantly seeking out more business or constantly seeking out more work or seeking out more opportunities, they work with attraction, right? So instead of, I'm going to DM these people in their Instagram DMs and seek it out, I'm going to create my marketing so that the people that I want come into me, they find me, right? And you guys found me this way, right? If anyone found me on YouTube, very feminine way, right? Because you watch, you like me, the attraction's there, you come in. I'm not selling to you. There's a feeling of, oh, there's just this magnetism there. Very feminine business, works a lot more on energies matching, a lot more on attraction basis versus constantly seeking basis. It's two very, very different energies. Another thing with the more feminine side of business, it's a lot more intuitive. So there's a lot more room for things to change. Not every day is having to feel the same. There isn't this underlying feeling of lack if we do it properly. There is this trust that things are always working out exactly the way they need to be. It's a hard thing to master, but that is an element of the more feminine side of business. There's also an element of people finding them that are so unbelievably aligned and not having to convince people that they need them, right? So you're not having to convince people that they need you as their yoga teacher. People can see that from you. Does this make sense? And can you see the differences between these two businesses immediately? Now, quite often, what a lot of, I don't even think it's just yoga teachers. I think a lot of people in general, I know that I found this. When I first started, I found the idea of selling really uncomfortable, right? And I can imagine that at least some of you also feel that way. The idea of having to sell something to people, to put together something and really have to sell it and tell everyone how great it is, really, really nerve-wracking. And I think the reason that, first of all, we find this so challenging is because we often see the more masculine side of it, right? So trying to see if I can think of an example. So a more masculine marketing tactic is, as we said, the cold DMs in your Instagram, but also the creating like this urgency around it as well. So like you have 24 hours, being a bit forceful, creating this feeling of lack, right? And that's what it's all sort of rooted in, is this feeling of lack, of like, I need this, it's gonna go, what am I gonna do? Like this feeling of almost fear in that, which it is a marketing tactic that a lot of people do use, talking to people's pain points. It's what it's called. And I don't disagree with it. However, I think that you get to choose how far you run with this. It is one way of marketing. It doesn't, for me, feel very aligned with yoga, but I know people within the yoga industry that use it and do it. So it's not wrong, right? However, I know for so many people, selling in that way doesn't feel in alignment with them. Whether it be in alignment with yoga or not, it does not feel in alignment with them. It doesn't feel like a true reflection of their energy and the way in which they share, right? Whereas the more feminine way of marketing, as we've said, is working a lot more on, if I'm speaking to my soul students, they are going to find me. If I'm standing in my truth, if I'm sharing in my truth, I'm speaking very, very clearly to who it is that I want. Again, a difference between the masculine and the feminine business. The masculine business is trying to speak to the masses. It thinks that everyone should need them, is trying to be jack of all trades, master of none. The feminine business, the reason that attraction works so well is because she's not trying to be everyone's teacher, right? I'm using she and he, but it's just a way of phrasing. It's not necessarily girl or boy, right? But she is so clear in who she's speaking to. Her voice is so clear. Her soul students are so clear that she doesn't need to speak to everyone. And there is an element of, I will bring you back to this, of you do not want to be everyone's teacher. Because if you are everyone's teacher, you're just okay. And people aren't going to buy high ticket offerings from someone who's just okay. They're also not going to enter your community in the way that you want them to and really connect with you if you're not giving them something to connect with, right? People connect to authenticity, people connect to depth, but people also connect to things they have in common with people, right? So I always use the example of what you've seen from me, because that's something that you've probably experienced quite a lot because you've been in my world for a little while now. But there are things that I share that will not resonate with everyone, right? They just simply won't, and that's okay. I'm not here for everyone. But the people that do connect with me, we have a great time, right? They're in my community. I also can trust that they're going to be there. And this comes with time, but there is a level of trust you end up building because the feminine business is based off of relationships, right? Which goes really, really well with yoga, because yoga is all about community and bringing people together. The feminine business is very, very structured on creating relationships built of trust, but also creating relationships built on this mutual, not need, but mutual support, right? You support them into becoming, within yoga, a higher version of themselves, or recovering, or deepening their practice, whatever it might be. But there's also that feeling of they are really attracted to you and they enjoy being in your energy. And this is where we're kind of going to go from, is the energy that we create and the way in which we do this. But before we even begin, I do want to touch on career changes, because that is kind of the big topic of this session, and how to navigate career changes. So first things first, when we're navigating career changes, there's going to be people who tell you to do this in so many different ways. I'm going to tell it to you so it keeps you in your more feminine business energy, right? The last thing I want you to do is to create a feeling of desperation in your yoga teaching. And what I mean by that is, I don't want you to feel like, oh my God, I need this class or I need this client because otherwise I'm not going to make ends meet. I don't want you to start your business in that way. I don't want to, I mean, it might happen by accident, but I don't want to encourage that for you, right? Because all that's doing is creating a desperate energy, and the universe can feel a desperate energy, right? Not only can the universe feel a desperate energy, but so can a client, so can people, so can everyone, right? A desperate energy is, oh, I'll slash my prices, like whatever you need, right? Versus an attraction energy, which isn't that. So what I really would encourage here is you really thinking about, what does that transition look like? What do I need to make myself feel really comfortable throughout this transition. So I think previously I asked you to take some time to do like a rough budget and look at what you would need. Now, what I would encourage from here is, if you haven't already started building this business physically, start now. And whatever jobs you're in, it may be a case of you going part time. It may be a case of you going, okay, I'm gonna 6 months and see where I'm at, right? And in your mind being like, 6 months, that's it, right? There's 6 months here. I'm going to give myself that time and space to build this business and not have to worry about ends meeting, right? There's also a level of, and this is where the femininity and the feminine energy really comes in, and this is something you're going to have to learn very, very quickly, or it's going to be hard, is accepting support. Look at your support systems around you and use them, right? Not in a horrible way, but I guarantee you that you have support that you probably don't even realize. And this is where really thinking about, okay, where am I resisting having support? Where am I resisting, for example, oh, I really want to teach class on a Friday evening, but I have none of us have, I don't think we have kids, but for example, I have kids, maybe my husband's offered to look after the kids, but I feel bad going out on a Friday night. Take that support, right? Allow that support to come in. It could look like anything, but this support is really, really, really important, because businesses aren't built on their own. Businesses are not built by themselves, right? And you will need a support system, and you have a support system. Even if you don't realize it's there, the people who are around you, the people who are encouraging you, they are going to be so helpful to you along this journey, right? Even if it's just them going, you're doing a good job, right? You've got this. And trust that if that support system isn't where you want it to be now, it's also going to come when you step into this energy of beginning to. Okay. So know that that support system, when it comes and when you see support being given to you, take it, right? Rather than, oh, I should be doing this on my own, or, oh, that means I'm not good enough. Take any support that is offered, because it is there to help you. Quite often, when we are manifesting, for example, a change or something, the universe brings us what we need, but not always in the way that we want it, right? So it might not bring it to you in the way that you expected, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take it. It brings it to you in the way you most need it. It brings it to you in the way that it can in that moment. So do trust that. But coming back to, as we were saying, of how to sort of navigate this, option one, part-time. Go part-time from what your job now, build the rest of that. So use the time that you're away from your current job to build the yoga side of things, until it eventually gets to a point where it's at least 50-50, or you feel as if, yeah, this is tipping the edge, I can move into it, right? The other option is to really focus on your savings and work towards having a buffer amount of savings. And this is actually what I did. So I started teaching probably 6 months before I left my job. It's about 6 months that I started the yoga business side of things. Slowly, I hadn't done too much, but I was starting. And then because I was a teacher at the time, it got to sort of August, I handed in my notice. I was like, okay, this is my last academic year. I had savings to get me to the end of the year. And that worked really, really well. I did the same thing when I moved from Dubai to here, because I knew that some of my income was changing. I had enough savings to get me to the end of the year. And I really encourage you, if you're going through any changes and you know that you're going to have to do like a hard stop, or you're going to have to do a bit of a jump or a leap, having something put aside, whether even if it's a support system, maybe you don't have something put aside, but you can move home with family, or you can rely on support from someone. There is an element of, if people are happy to offer that support, take it. And I say this because quite often people have that support and don't even consider it. And it's going to be vital. And when you speak to Nicola, actually, who's going to come and speak to you in the Easter weekend week, she's really good at describing this. She tells you all about how she has opened a huge yoga studio now, but because of that, she actually lived at home for much longer than a lot of her friends. But she was like, right, my mum's happy to have me, I'm going to do it this way. And there's so many different ways, but that was her way of, I'm going to accept the support that's around me. So do not be fearful in accepting support. do not think that it makes you any less than what you are already, right? So really, really, really be open to this. Savings, as I said, very important, and just putting a little bit aside. It might be the case of, okay, 6 months, I'm going to put a little bit aside every month. And then from there, I've got 2 months left of that can keep me sort of afloat and keep me happy, right? That 6 months to build is a lot of time now that you have everything in mind, right? So this way of navigating a career change is much, much, much more palatable than just quit your job, right? Just leap. And you know what? Sometimes leaping is okay. Sometimes if it feels really, really right within you and you can see how it would work and you have a support system and you're like, you know what? It's what I need to do. And I've seen teachers in this work out for them. So it's not a definite no, but I want to really speak to every single one of you scenarios, right? So hopefully at least one of the things I've mentioned, you're like, I could make that work, right? I could go part-time. I could do a 50-50 and then slowly take the transition. Now, the reason that I say this is I don't want you falling into lack, as I sort of mentioned. The last thing I want is for you to jump into something and start in a space of fear of I need this to work, right? Because from there, you're already going to be pushed into that more masculine business because you're scared. And that's not what we want. Does that make sense? Are there any questions on that? Because I know that's a really big topic. Does that feel like something you can sort of take forwards and make a game plan around? Yeah? Perfect. Love that. Okie dokie. So now that we've tackled that sort of idea of career changes, those of you that have one-to-one sessions as well, if you want to talk about your specific career change in depth and it's something that you're fearful around, we can talk about that. We can really dive into that. I will actually start scheduling any VIP sessions probably next week. So you'll get a message from me if you do have those and we will book them in. So yes, moving sort of forwards from that is thinking about, okay, what does this look like in practice in your yoga business, having this slightly more energetic business, using an magnetism and attraction to pull in clients, using alignment to really put you in the right place. Now, first things first, this is where your soul students come in. So remember how we took that time thinking about your soul students and your core values. The starting point of creating attraction, magnetism, alignment within your business is being really, really sure of who you're going to be as a teacher. Now, remember, this is going to change as you grow and as you change, but having a good idea to begin with is really important because from there we can begin to create a more feminine brand and I don't know if I want to use a more feminine brand because that indicates like the way it might look, but I mean in the sense of energy. You can create a really aligned brand, right? That's in alignment with your core values, in alignment with your core students, with your soul students, but also it begins to talk about the ways in which you structure your income, which we have again already spoken about, is thinking about, okay, where am I going to find these students? Now that we've seen this and we can say, okay, I know that I want to be working with people who've got injury recovery. Maybe I'm working with physios. Maybe I'm working with PTs. And there's a PT who wants to add yoga for their clients or something like that, right? There is a level of looking at that depending on what your core values and your niche is. From there, we then think, okay, the brand is coming together, and this is where we're really going to talk about marketing in this, because I think that we see marketing as a big, big difference between the two. So when we think about your marketing, we want to create marketing that is really attractive. That's not the word, magnetic, right? We want to make it so that people are able to connect with you really, really easily, sorry. Now, when we think about marketing, this depends on how you're going to market when it comes to your students. So for example, if you look at your soul students, you look at their ages, you look at where you're most likely to find them, what I will say is you need to be very, very tactful with your marketing. So for example, if you are wanting lots of corporate clients, why are you marketing on Facebook? You would be much better served marketing on LinkedIn. right? So thinking about all of the ways in which you can connect with them. So for example, I can give you mine for this. Now, I know that I like to connect with yoga teachers. I also know that I like to connect with people who are on a bit of a spiritual practice with their yoga practice and want to really deepen their yoga practice. Now, the way in which I tend to find them, I know that they're mostly women. They're between the age of 26 and 35, usually, some above, some below, but that tends to be the age that comes up for me. Now, where am I most likely to find these people? Instagram, YouTube. If they already have a yoga practice, they're likely to look up yoga on Instagram, they're likely to look up a yoga class on YouTube. This is the way in which I connect with them because I know exactly where they're going to be. Whereas if my soul students were maybe a little bit older and I was wanting to do yoga for slightly older people, maybe people going through menopause or something like that, I might not spend as much time on Instagram. I might not spend as much time on YouTube. I might spend more time on Facebook because I know that that older generation spends time on Facebook. If I'm trying to market to Gen Z, I might have to start spending time on TikTok, right? Thinking about the marketing platforms that your clients are likely to be on. And remember that marketing isn't just social media marketing. We've already spoken a little bit about social media marketing, and we're going to go into it in loads of depth. But remember, marketing can be so many other things. It could be flyers at your local cafe or at your local gym and putting things there, because a lot of people see that. And if you are working with a more localized community area, sometimes it is more effective to have a Facebook group or a Facebook community than it would be to grow and have loads of followers on Instagram, because there's followers all over the world, right? Whereas it doesn't serve your local community to have followers all over the world, because you want people who are going to come to your weekly classes in the community center, right? Does that make sense? So thinking about the more localized ways of marketing as well, it could be putting your flyers up. It could be also collaborating with local businesses. That's also a really, really good way. And all of these ways, you're not having to go and be that slightly more forceful masculine marketing. You're creating something that's going to attract your students in. That is the aim, is to create things that are so magnetic that students want to come to you. Okay, does that make sense? Magnetism is really, really key. And the way in which we are creating this magnetism is strong core values, strong idea of our soul students, then it's the brand. This is where we're really going to come into the brand that you've probably already started, because that was one of our gentle, soft homework bits earlier on. You need to kind of understand that your branding and your marketing will speak to your students, whether you like it or not. And you can choose to use it and it benefit you, or you can choose to not use it, right? I know so many teachers that, oh, I hate marketing. But okay, that's fine. But what you're actually doing is just missing out on a really, really good way to speak to your students. And I bet you would love to speak to your students and know that they are already in alignment with you, right? So it's not about things looking beautiful necessarily. It's not about things needing to be perfect. It's about, this is a tool to connect with the people that I want to be teaching, okay? So when we think about your branding, obviously we've spoken about the slightly more basic things of the colors that you use and the fonts, and a bold font creates a bolder feeling, a softer color creates a softer feeling, whatever it might be. But also what I really want you to think about is the energy behind your brand as a teacher, right? And the energy behind your brand is really what I want people to feel throughout your marketing, right? And remember, marketing can be as simple as a social media post. Most of what I post on social media is marketing, right? It's part of my job, right? And it's fun because it's also me, because my job's in alignment with who I am. I'm like, oh, this is fun. I like this. I enjoy this, because it's something that comes very naturally, because my brand is such a natural extension of who I am. And that's what I want for you as well, right? Is to be passionate about where it is that you're speaking to, so that the marketing is easy. You're not feeling like, oh my God, what do I do? You're not feeling like, oh gosh, how am I going to find these people? How are these people going to find me, right? Whereas if you're just speaking to them, they will find you. And even an example with like Instagram sponsored posts, which again are a really fantastic way, more so for if you're running like community events. I find them fantastic for local community events. Now, they only work if you speak to the people you want. If you just do a random, really, really broad Instagram advert where you're trying to speak to everyone, you will not find the people. Whereas if you know exactly who your soul students are, and you know exactly what your values are, and you know exactly who this event, for example, is speaking to, then that will be a really good turnaround on that Instagram ad. You can run it for 2 weeks. And that's how when I used to do moon circles, that's how I used to fill my moon circles. I knew exactly who I was speaking to. I'd run them for 2 weeks. My moon circles would always be full. But if I'd been speaking to everyone and put the advert out for men, it wouldn't have worked, right? I knew exactly who my soul students were and spoke to them directly. Okay. Does that make sense? How does this feel? Do you see the difference between maybe what you were thinking selling was going to be like versus what selling can be? Yeah. Now,
Absolutely.
also, yes. Is there a question there?
No,
Good,
I just absolutely. Yeah, it
good,
makes a little sense.
good. That's what we want. Now, continuing with this, within your business, everything I want you to do, and I'm hoping that this doesn't feel too macro here, I'm hoping this is going to feel like something you can really begin to do, is I want you to create a feeling with everything that you do. And I know that sounds really, really vague, but bear with me. When you are sharing things, I want you to really share an energy. And this is where it's really, really important of these things need to be in alignment with you and they need to feel authentic. So for example, when you are sharing, I'm going to use the example of Instagram because that is one of the most popular ways of marketing for yoga teachers. It's nice because it's free. However, please know that it may not be your main way. And we're going to talk about your main ways of marketing. We're going to have a whole week of talking about, okay, use this platform for this, right? But I'm going to use Instagram today because I know you are all on Instagram and I know that this is the way that most yoga teachers market. It's a great way for yoga teachers to market. So the difference is in when I'm talking about creating a feeling is a yoga teacher posting a picture of them in a handstand, for example. And the caption on this first post is handstand Tuesdays. Come to my class on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Option one, there's no feeling, there's not much there. Whereas teacher two, that is using magnetism, that is using authenticity to really speak to the students she wants to teach, is here's the journey to my handstand. Here's how many times I fell. Here's how many times I thought I couldn't do it. Here's how many times I wanted to give up. Here's actually the bigger lessons that I learned on my way to a handstand or a headstand. And here's why the journey is so much more important than the destination. If you want to explore this with me, my class is at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. Can we feel the difference between these two posts and these two different ways of selling, right? This one didn't feel like selling. This one was just a natural extension of chatting about it. And you already invoked a feeling within the person who's reading this. Does that make sense? Immediately, you either connected or disconnected with them. For most people, they probably will have connected if they've ever tried to do a headstand and fallen, right? So that immediately creates connection. And this is where it doesn't need to be a super long caption. It just needs to come from the heart. It just needs to come from something a little bit deeper. Does that make sense? Can you already begin to see how we're beginning to invoke feeling? You also invoke feeling through all of the imagery that you choose to use, right? And you can really, really see this. So, for example, one thing that I find really funny about my imagery, but it speaks exactly to who I am, is you will, if you go on my social media platforms, you will not see any pictures of arm balances. Not because I can't do them. They don't speak to the energy of my brand particularly well. So I never love the images of them. When I see other teachers post them up, oh, stunning, looks great. But even in the way of the feeling of the imagery, you'll see lots of backbends. You'll see lots of really fluid videos of flowing so people get a feel for my classes. It's actually very, very intentional. It's not because I can't do the poses. It's because, okay, I've looked at the energy I'm creating. I've looked at what I want my students to feel. And this is what I really feel speaks to the energy of my brand. Does that make sense? It's something really silly and small, but actually, if I just, it really speaks to the energy behind my brand. People see that and go, oh, that's really beautiful, but not in the sense of uh, Instagram being really performative for yoga teachers. I understand that Instagram can feel really, really performative, but actually the reason I'm not sharing all kind of funky arm balances and crazy stuff is because, yes, I'm speaking to a more advanced student sometimes, But I'm not speaking to the more advanced student that just wants to learn arm balances and crazy things. Does that make sense? I'm speaking to the more advanced student who wants to deepen their intuition and their practice. So if I were to post all of my funky arm balances or whatever, I'd probably bring in the wrong kind of student. And they'd come to my class and be like, oh, that was a bit too spiritual for me. I just want to be doing whatever it might be. Does that make sense? So it's just simple things like this. And it's not, you don't have to think, oh, I'm not going to post pictures like that, but it's going to come really naturally to you, in the sense of the things that you love will speak to your energy. Do not feel like you need to be doing what everyone else is doing. That's actually just going to hinder you, right? Creating a feeling that is really in alignment with you. So if you are really softly spoken, right, you're not going to have big, like, capital letters, exclamation marks, red emojis in your caption, because that's not in alignment with who you are, right? Whereas if you are like that, go for it. But what I really, really want to create for you is that when people see your marketing, however it might be, I know we've been speaking about Instagram, but however it might be, when people see your marketing, they feel like they know you. This is really powerful, right? And this is not, they don't really know you. Like, they know you as a teacher, and that's what's important. They don't need to know you as a person necessarily, but I want them to know you as a teacher and get a feel for you and either connect or disconnect with you, right? And this is where we're talking a bit more about social media here, so bear with me, but please know we're going to talk about non-social media marketing. But the reason that social media is so fantastic is it gives you a constant connection with your students, right? You pop up in their brain every day if you're using things like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it might be. You have the potential to pop up into their heads every day. And everything that you share is an opportunity to connect. So for example, and this is where a lot of people kind of reach a kind of tipping point where they're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I should be posting this. For example, think about the teacher who just shares their classes, which is fine, no issue with that, just shares their classes, posts it on their story at the beginning of the week, versus the teacher that maybe has shared a picture of their cat, and maybe they've shared what they've been doing, the book they've been reading. I know it sounds really silly, but the book they've been reading, and the new student goes to check, like they've gone on studio or they've gone to see, oh, she's hosting this class at the community hall, goes onto the Instagram, and they can't see anything on the story because she posted her weekly class on Monday and it's Tuesday. I can't see anything on the story. Versus the other teacher, they've gone and gone, oh, she's a cat. I love cats. Oh, she's gone for like a mindful walk. I love that. I feel like I'd really get on with her. I feel like we'd really connect energy wise. Oh, she's gone for a run and she's running a marathon. I'm running a marathon. She's going to understand how I feel. Can you see how something that feels so not yoga business related is actually a way for you to connect with your students? And once you begin to understand that when we're talking about attraction and magnetism, the more you share, the more people connect. Have boundaries with what you share. You do not have to share everything, but you can share a picture of your coffee, right? And people will be like, oh, I drink coffee. And it's so silly. It's such a small thing. But I guarantee you there are people that I go onto their social media, I'm like, oh, I feel like we'd be friends. Like, we've got so much in common. And that's actually what we want. We want you to create these connections. And that's why social media is so powerful in terms of marketing, because it gives you the ability to create connections, right? So that is something I really, really want you to think about, is how is it that I can create feeling with the things that I'm sharing? So if there's social media posts or if there's imagery I want to do or whatever it might be, what am I trying to share? Here's a cheat. It's your core values. You're trying to share your core values. How are you sharing them? You can talk about your core values every day. You can do a different post for your core values every day. Your marketing is just lots of different ways to talk about your core values as a teacher, because those core values speak to your soul students. This feels easy now, right? And immediately, this is what we call a magnetic business, because what this is doing, this is immediately attracting the people that you want. And this has worked so many times, and I would not share this with you if it didn't work, right? And you do not need to have 1,000,001 followers. And I cannot stress that. I know we're focusing on social media marketing. We're going to have a whole week on other marketing, but when it comes to magnetism, this social media site can be really, really, really good tool. But it does not matter how many followers you have. It really, really doesn't. Because how many people do you want in your class? 10? Max 30? If you've got 100 followers, you've got loads. But what we actually want is we want followers who we're really connecting with, right? We don't just want the random followers who never look at us again. We want the people who we're really connecting with. And the more we share, the more they can connect, right? So another thing I really want you to think about is how it is that you can really show up for whoever is there, right? And this is where I know a lot of people have questions about having a business page, not having a business page. I go back and forth. I think it depends how you use social media. So, for example, for me, my business page kind of is my personal page now. They kind of blend into one, but it works really, really well. But I would say that like 80% of what I post is business. And then the odd 20% is great because it helps me connect with people and people feel like they know me. Whereas if you want to share like most of your personal stuff on your personal Instagram, keep it, start a new page for your business, right? I know I'm talking mostly about Instagram, but I feel like you guys are going to use it, so it's okay. But please know that we're going to talk about other ways and we can create your little like marketing suite together next. I think next week's marketing. So we will talk about that. But I feel like we're all probably going to be using Instagram to some extent because it is so fantastic for making magnetic connections. Any questions before I dive into my next little bit? No, is this making sense? Yeah, good. Okay, I'm glad. Now, the next thing we really, really want to think about is thinking about, first of all, that like imposter syndrome that we get. And this is where, again, this is one of, I find, the big barriers between a lot of teachers becoming magnetic is they feel really fearful. They feel like, who am I to do this, right? And this is probably the biggest and maybe even the only barrier that I feel like a lot of teachers have between really showing up in their authentic self and allowing themselves to become magnetic. And something I really, really want you to think about is, who are you not to? First of all, there are so many people out there with a 200-hour qualification, just like you. I feel like everyone has 200-hour qualification who are doing it. There are people out there without a 200-hour qualification who are doing it, that know less than you, that have less like life experience than you, are less good than you are, and are probably doing it. But even on top of that, there is also an element of, it would be a crying shame for you not to share what you want to share and for you not to post the classes that you're teaching, for you not to post the workshop that you're planning, for you not to post your one-to-one coaching that we're going to talk about coming up. But it would be a crying shame for you not to share that because someone might be looking for you. And if you don't share about it, if you don't show up on social, so for example, the teachers that say to me, I hate marketing, I don't want to do it. But what about the people who need you? Like, you're not doing it actually for you. You're doing it so the people that need you can find you. What if I didn't come and talk about this yoga teacher mentorship? It probably wouldn't have affected me as much as it would have affected you guys not finding a teacher you resonated with enough to do a mentorship with. And that's not what I want. I don't want people to feel like I'm not showing up for them. So actually, when we're showing up in marketing or we're selling, you need to. People are looking for you. And if you don't do it, they might not see it, right? And actually think about that and let that resonate for a moment of, the people that need you are looking for you. But if you keep hiding, they're not going to be able to find you. And all we're doing is actually robbing them of an opportunity to practice yoga, robbing them an opportunity at healing, robbing them from finding a teacher they really, really resonate with. There's so many things that through us feeling like we're not good enough yet, we're actually robbing from our students. Does that make sense? Asteya, non-stealing, right? You're stealing your gift, your light from your students by being fearful for sharing it, right? And I really want you to sit with that. And if there's ever a moment where you're like, I'm scared, what are people going to think, whatever it might be, it's not about that. It's about the students who need you. And trust me, there are students who need you, right? Because the students who don't need me and are still looking for their teacher are probably looking for you, right? And if you don't show up, they can't find you. Okay, does that make sense? Does that resonate? Does that feel like
Yeah, that's really, really helpful.
good? That's what we want. I want that to be helpful. And even know if, for example, some people who I've seen this done really, really well recently, and I'm going to share it just in case it resonates with any of you guys. The Undone yoga brand. I don't know if you guys have stumbled across this, but so many people on Instagram are like sharing, oh, you know what, like I felt like there wasn't like a teacher sharing like, oh, you know, like I was constantly seeing Instagram and yogis doing yoga in this way, and I never saw anyone doing yoga in their pajamas in their bedroom. And that's their entire brand. Is they started speaking to people, and immediately people were like, oh, I do yoga in my pajamas in my bedroom, and that I feel really seen. Right? It's not, and this is what I mean in the sense of your branding doesn't need to be beautiful, but it needs to speak. Their branding speaks exactly to the students. They are still branding, they're just branding in a very, very different way. That is still branding. I follow a really good yoga teacher, actually. I think he's called Scotty. He is a fat yoga teacher, and he talks about how there's no space for fat bodies in yoga. And he speaks, and his brand is all about yoga for bigger bodies, right? And he speaks to it so clearly. And his brand is all around that. The colors he uses, the fonts he uses, everything. I'm actually going to send him into the chat. Let me find him, because his branding is fantastic, but it's very opposite to what you might be thinking. And I always want to share these because I know that mine is very sort of soft and feminine, but that's not the only way. What was his name? Scott. What's his name? And he really does. I'll have to find him for you afterwards, because he really does just speak. Oh, there we go. Like even his Instagram name, Scotty's Fat, is his Instagram name. Like it's so not the beautiful marketing, but my goodness, he's a fantastic teacher. And he shares, I'm going to send it to you now and you can have a look at it now in the chat, because I just want you to see that, because this is marketing done well, not just the way in which you've experienced, for example, my marketing. I want you to see it in other ways. So have a look at what I've just sent and you'll see his marketing. And even in his description, he's like, this is what I like, this is what to expect. So clear. Can you see immediately how his soul students go on there and go, oh my goodness, my teacher? It's not.
And they would feel really seen as well because it's so
Right?
different than like the mainstream
Yeah.
one. I love the pajamas idea too. I'm like, that is
Yeah.
brilliant.
This is the thing. So please remember that your brand doesn't have to look like anyone else's brand. It just needs to feel authentic to you. And everything that you share, even the less aesthetic things and the things that are maybe a little bit more whatever, probably going to connect to people even more. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
please know this, and please, you'll get more comfortable with this as time comes. And please know that when you first begin, you're going to be like, oh God, I feel like I'm really bad at this. Maybe you share your first like voiceover on a reel. You're like, oh, I feel really static. I feel like I'm really bad at this. That's okay. We're all bad when we start. I saw this thing recently that the cost of entry is not being good at something when you first start. That's the cost of entry, right? It's accepting that you're not going to be perfect. And it's accepting that it might be the first thing you post might be a little bit embarrassing. But that's okay, right? I'm not going to ask you to go back and look at my first YouTube video because I don't want you to, but I guarantee you it won't look like they did now. Trust me, it's pretty blonde. It's a long time ago now, but this is what I really need you to sit with, is the first time that you do something, it's not going to be good. It might actually be amazing, but if it's not good, that's okay. I sometimes think of it like let's just get those out the way, and then I'm going to find my groove with this. So for example, literally this week, I did a live on my Instagram, and my audio, absolute pain. It was terrible, really bad. But you know what? It's out the way. Next time, the audio is going to be perfect. So I'm going to spend a whole month figuring it out. So, and this is why how I really want you to sit with it, is that if the first time's not that good, that's okay. Because the next time will be better. And the first time is always the hardest, right? The first time where the audio is going and I'm like, I have no idea how to fix this, it's always the hardest. The next time when I've troubleshooted it, so much easier. And I really want you to remember that. If it feels really hard to begin with, it's going to feel easier. Just stick with it. Does that make sense? Yeah? Happy with that? Good. Hopefully this creates a little bit of inspiration there for you. The next thing I want to speak about, again, with the more feminine business, something I want you to bear in mind is this feeling of how much you need to be working. The masculine business feels like output equals like worth, basically. The more you work, the more worthy that you are. And don't get me wrong, your first year of teaching is probably the hardest you're going to work, I'd imagine. For me, I know it was, and I know a lot of teachers say the same thing. That first year in teaching, you do work quite hard just to kind of find your feet and to get really comfortable. You're also really inspired in that first year. So there's like a novelty there, which is great. We love the novelty because you're so inspired and you want to really work really hard and just fill your time with this and everything be like 99% business. And that actually is so serving for the energy of the first year. So I support that fully. But what I don't want you to fall into is this idea of, for example, and this is a really practical example of how your job is going to look different to someone else's job. My boyfriend's a lawyer. He works like 9 to 8. He works very long hours. But for example, when I was teaching a 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. class, I would go and teach that. I'd then have a back-to-back 8 till 9 a.m. And then from, let's say, 11 a.m. until 5 p.m., my days were empty, right? That's usually when I was doing my admin and things like that. But that time is actually my rest time because come 5 p.m., I'm working again. There's classes in the evening. And this was when I was doing a lot of timetabled studio classes, but still, that meant that in the evenings I was working. But if I was really thinking I needed to be productive or putting that productivity to work, sometimes what we find is that actually you're not resting in that time between classes. So your day structure may look different. Do not fall into the trap of everyone around me is working, I should be working too. And that sounds really, really silly, but you might find that you're like, oh my God, it's midday on a Wednesday and I'm just chilling out by the pool. Not that you have a pool, but I'm going on a walk and everyone else is at work. What am I doing? Right? But actually remember that, for example, even me now, I'm working on a Sunday. Does that mean that my Monday morning is going to be really tough? No, I've booked to get my nails done, but I have worked on Sunday, right? This is the thing. And actually really sitting in that of, if I was fearful of being like, oh gosh, it looks like I'm being really unproductive. No, our weeks are structured completely differently. And I don't want you to fall into the trap of like, oh, it's a Monday morning, I need to be really productive when you just taught all day on Sunday. Because you might work the weekends in your first year. You might love working the weekends. You might be working the weekends whilst you're working your job at the moment, right? And then you're like, you know what, Monday, I'm not going to go and work out. I'm going to have a chilled evening. Monday is my self-care evening or whatever it might be. And I really want you just to remember that. That's a word of warning there of your schedule is going to look really different, and don't fall into the trap of feeling like it needs to be anywhere near as productive as a 9 to 5 would be. Because the thing is what's great about 9 to 5 is they start at 9, but they clock off at 5. Whereas when you have your own business, your brain's probably always thinking, right? There's some things that you will have to on a Saturday go and do. For example, maybe you're posting to Instagram every single day because it's your marketing. That's work, right? And it is work, and it gets to be fun work. Just because your work is fun doesn't mean it's work. And that's also where I encourage you, just as a gentle reminder to keep you fresh. And we're going to talk about protecting your energy. So this really leads me into it very perfectly, is setting boundaries with your work. Just because you love your work doesn't mean it doesn't need boundaries, right? We want you to continue loving this job, but if you allow it to seep into everything, it can get old really quick. So a bit of advice that I give you is 6 days a week, yoga, if you want it to be, but at least have one day you don't practice yoga, you're not a yogi, you're non-yogic, you don't think about yoga, no yoga, right? I'm not telling you to go rob a bank, but no yoga for at least one day of the week. Be the most non-yogic you can be, right? Because on that's
Have a margarita.
Pardon?
Go have a margarita.
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean, though. I really want you to just have at least one day, and this is going to be even more important for you as you build a business around this, the boundary of, this is my non-yoga day. I'm having a margarita. I am going on a night out, or I am going to the pub, or whatever it might be. This is my non-yoga day. Today, I am not a yogi. You are, but like today, I'm not yogi. And that is going to be really important for just keeping your energy where it needs to be, because the last thing that we want is to make something you love feel tiring, right? And I also will caveat that with, if you do have moments where you're really tired as a yoga teacher, I've had that. I've had moments where I've not felt burnt out in the way I probably felt burnt out in my previous job, but there were definitely times where I was like, oh gosh, I'm really tired. do know that actually you feeling really, really tired or beginning to burn out is going to feel really different to the way it did before. And that's something I just want you to remember, because sometimes people are like, oh, well, it's nothing like when I was in my old job, so it's fine. Which is fine, but we don't really want it to get to that point, right? So if you have moments where you're like, you know what, I'm really tired, especially if you've got a lot of physical classes on, maybe you've got a week full of lots of physical classes, like, you know what, I'm really tired, I'm going to take the day off. I'm going to take a complete off day, or I'm going to swap a class. For example, if you were doing like a community center class, like, I'm going to swap it to yin, or I'm going to swap it to a more restorative stretch class. Please do give yourself the time and space for that, because do know that burnout, I don't want to call it burnout because it's not the same, but do know that pushing yourself a little bit too far is going to feel different than it maybe did before. And your energy is the most important thing. This brings me on to protecting your energy as a teacher. I don't know if you guys are going to love this. You will love this. Now, it is really, really important that your energy comes first as a teacher. And I know you've probably heard this already, but it's much easier said than done when you've got like a 6 a.m. class, right? You're like, oh my goodness, you expect me to get up before like 5 o'clock. No, I'm not. But your energy needs to be your priority, which means that your yoga practice needs to be your priority. You are never not going to be a student, right? And you know, the amount of times I actually really do love yoga, which some people find shocking, but I adore my job. I adore being a yoga teacher. I love yoga. So will you see me in a class? Yes. I try and get into a class at least once a week, not because I've led teacher trainings, not because I need to go to a class. Can I do a fully fledged practice at home? Yes. But I love yoga and I'm always going to be a student. And my practice is really important. Just because I teach other people about being a yoga teacher doesn't mean that I'm the master yoga teacher who knows all, right? And this is something I feel like a lot of teachers fall into, is they're like, I'm a teacher now, so how do I still be a student? Being a student is where it all began and it needs to stay there. Being a student needs to be your priority, right? So, practically, what this looked like for me was I used to have Thursday mornings, used to be my self practice, and I had a teacher who I just adored. And I would go to him on a Thursday morning. At the moment, it's, I think, going to be a Saturday morning, because again, I found a class, but it's one class a week for me out of like one class that's guided. And for you, it might be more than that. For me, one class does me just fine. And it's usually like an Ashtanga class. I'm like, I need someone to kick my butt a bit and really switch off. But I love that. And that really keeps me grounded in my practice. And that really keeps me a student first. Because all week I'm like, oh yeah, I get to go to that class. Like, I'm looking forward to that. Or, oh gosh, I was really pushed and I saw a bit of my practice. And then actually it inspires my teaching. What I will say with this is, you may not find this, but I'll say this because I know that I find this. Sometimes really look at the teachers you go and practice with, if you do enjoy practicing in a studio, for example, or online or whatever it might be. I find that the teachers that I most switch off with and become a student with are the teachers who teach very differently to me. I find it a little bit harder to switch off with teachers that teach very similarly to me, because I'm like, oh, I love that. That would go well in my class. Like, oh, I'm really inspired, which is great. They have their space as well. But actually, what I really find beneficial for just being a student and turning the teacher brain off is going to a teacher who teaches a little bit differently than me. So just something to bear in mind if you find that you're going to classes and you're like, oh, and your teacher brain's still on, try maybe going to a different class that is a little bit different to the way in which you teach. So for example, I never teach Ashtanga, or I went to a rocket class yesterday. I'm not a rocket yoga teacher, but that's exactly what I needed, because I could just switch off and be a student. It was great. So just something to bear in mind there is you may have to feel around for this, but please make sure you are always, always, always staying a student. Protecting your energy is also really, really important. So quite often I think we think that, oh, well, I'm going to have so much time on my hands when I sort of leave my 9 to 5 and then it's just me, which of course you will have a lot more time on your hands, but there is a slightly different level of priorities. Whereas your self practice can be your 100% priority because your 9 to 5 is something you might not enjoy. When your job is something you enjoy, it can feel a lot harder to set those boundaries between, no, this is my time. This is my time to enjoy my practice. This is my time to journal. This is my time to do my own healing, not for work. And that may not look like a morning routine sometimes if you're teaching a really early class, right? So please know that you need to set aside time every day at some point every day to protect your energy, right? And I mean that in the sense of whether it be your own practice, whether it be meditation, whether it be taking a deep breath, a nice chilled cup of coffee, whatever that might be. Please know that if you don't have your energy in the right space and you're exhausted, and unfortunately, I have seen this happen to a lot of teachers where they're showing up in their marketing and it's just lackluster because that's how they're feeling. And they have a really great connection where the way they feel shines through their marketing, but because they're not feeling good, it shines through their marketing. And don't get me wrong, there is a level of sometimes not feeling good can be a really good teaching moment for your students, but only when you've moved through it, right? Only when you've gone, yeah, I went through a process where I was like really not feeling my best, but here's what I learned. Here's some messages to you if you're also going through that. Because we're human as yoga teachers. We're here because we probably suffered everything everyone else is suffering. We just found a way that really works for us to cope with it. But what we don't want is if you're feeling really lackluster, if your energy is feeling not where it needs to be, for that to shine through unintentionally in your work. Does that make sense? And remember, even with like yoga classes, the law of entrainment states that they're all going to come to your vibration. If your energy is not protected, we don't want them feeling the stress, whatever it might be, right? So it's really, really important. Even if it's just before a class, I sometimes would sit and just take a moment, close down the eyes, imagine like a bubble just around me, be like, okay, clear energy. Could be a bit sage, could be a bit Palo Santo, whatever it is that you like to do to cleanse your energy and just feel like you're in your highest space. Please make time for this. And I know it sounds very, very basic, but it is really, really important because your students will feel it, especially if you are creating those deep connections that we want. It's really important that your energy is in the right space, right? And at the end of the day, this is your job. So you get to create a space where you get to show up and just feel like your highest, right? So just bear in mind that. My last little thing to share, I think I'm just checking my list. Yeah, this is my last little thing to share is something I also want you to bear in mind with your more feminine side of business is that not every day is going to be the same. And also it can be really, really beneficial to avoid burnout and to avoid feeling exhausted all the time, to align sort of more business things with seasons of life for women, a lot of us with our cycle as well. And this is something that I've found really, really helpful, and you might also find it helpful. So, for example, when you are, and this is where obviously if you have a studio class, you have less flexibility over this. But if you were doing your own classes in like a space that you rented, say it's your time of the month and you have a power yoga that you normally teach on a Thursday evening, and you're like, I cannot do that. You can change it. It's your business, right? It can be 3 weeks of the month it's power yoga and the last week it's yin, because that's going to be really good for everyone else's recovery too. And you need it, right? And this is what I mean. It gets to work for you. You don't have to follow the structures that you see around you. You don't have to follow the structures that you think you need to. And actually aligning your business to when you feel your best. So, for example, I had photos taken recently. I made sure that I had my photos taken at the time of my cycle where I was going to feel my best, because I can do that. There was no rush on it, right? But this is, again, just going to help you really sharpen your highest. So, if you haven't explored cycle syncing, I really would love, I'm going to send you some resources to have a little read, but aligning things in your business with this can be really helpful in terms of just the way in which you structure your work, because your work looks really different. So for example, what my work looks like in a month, obviously there's the teaching of classes, but there's a lot that goes on beyond the teaching of classes, right? There's the marketing, there's the content that I take for social media, there's the planning of meditations, the planning of classes, whatever it might be, right? I will often schedule these around different times. So, for example, if I need to be really outward and filming lots of videos, I'll do that around ovulation, or do that around my follicular phase where I'm feeling a lot more outward. Whereas in my luteal phase where I'm feeling a lot more inward, that's my time for planning classes. That's my time for meditations. That's my time for planning any rituals I want to share on Soul Shower, writing any marketing material rather than taking it, right? So it doesn't need to be the structure you may have experienced before. It can begin to ebb and flow a little bit more. And I just want you to be aware of this, right? And be really, really aware that you can align your business in a way that it really, really, really works for you. Because no, it's not fun having to go and teach. And I know because I used to have to do this a really strong power yoga class on the first day of your cycle. It's not fun. Really, really isn't, right? But if you can change that, and this is where studio classes create a little bit less flexibility because it's probably a little bit unreliable to ask for a cover once a month. But if you have more control over it, so maybe for example, if you have classes you teach virtually, or even if you have like corporates and privates and things like this, it's much easier to be like, okay, we're going to go a little bit more gentle today, right? Whatever it might be. So just something to bear in mind there is you get to make it work for you. And that's really what the biggest thing I want you to take from this is that your business is meant to feel fun. Your business is meant to feel intuitive and in alignment with who you are. You shouldn't be having to, obviously, there is an element of you needing to maybe push yourself out of your comfort zone if you're very fearful, but you also shouldn't have to be doing things you really, really don't want to do within reason. Marketing is probably important. I'm not going to lie. But I also think you probably would enjoy the teachers that say they hate marketing or they hate social media. I'm like, what if I could get you marketing in a way that feels really, really good for you and then it didn't feel like that? Because maybe you don't need to be marketing on, if you hate Instagram. There's so many other ways, right? So does that make sense? Are there any questions on this? No? Okay, so just a final few parting points on becoming really, really magnetic within your business. First things first is that embodiment. So you practicing everything you preach, which you already do because you chose core values that were really, really authentic to you. But the more you stand in these, the more you share these, the more magnetic you become. Sharing your voice in a way that feels really, really in alignment. That's a way to become magnetic. Speaking, whether it be through a caption, whether it be through colors, whether it be through imagery, everything is a vessel for sharing your voice and sharing your energy and knowing that everything is a way of sharing energy. So that's another way for sharing your voice, however you choose to do it. Another way of becoming really, really magnetic within your business is finding joy in it, doing things you enjoy. Don't do the things you don't want to enjoy, right? So again, I feel like we've spoken about that in depth, but doing the things that are really in alignment with you, the more you stand in alignment, the more magnetic you become. And I know alignment can feel like a very vague sense, but go by what feels good right now. If something feels good, do more of it. Trust that that is guiding you in the right direction. If something feels good, if privates feel good, focus your energy there. Just trust that you're being led in that sense and you will become really, really magnetic. The other thing is protecting your energy, right? Really protecting your energy, making sure you are able to show up in your absolute highest, right? Not pretending to be anything that you're not feeling like you have anything to prove, knowing that your students need you, and giving yourself time to be in your own practice before you are there for others, even if that's a once a week yoga class, which is my preferred way of doing so. Any questions?
It definitely all makes a lot of sense and
Good.
it resonates.
Good. I'm glad. I'm really, really glad that that's resonated because I really feel like this is the one area that not enough people speak about. And I really do feel like it changes the entire feel of your work. Whereas one feels really forceful and fearful and like I need to be doing more, this one feels like, ooh, this all just gets to flow really easily. But I'm talking about for example, it's really talking about soul shower, for example. You'll notice I speak about soul shower most days. I'm like, oh, I'm doing a class. It's soul shower. Post it. My boyfriend's just done a yin class on soul shower. Post it, right? Because it's something I'm naturally doing. It just becomes a natural extension versus me being like, oh God, I need to think about a way to speak about soul shower today. No, naturally, because it's something that's really in alignment, I just can. And that's what we really want to create for you guys as well. Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Enjoy the rest of your Sundays. Any questions, please do let me know. In terms of things to be getting on with, I need you to kind of finish off the branding side of things. And I'd love to see it, not because I want to see it and I will give you feedback. Also, I'm just curious. I love the branding and marketing side of things. So if you have a branding Pinterest board, I do recommend Pinterest for like colors and even imagery as well, because imagery invokes feeling. So if you're really grounded, you might have imagery of more earthy things. I know it sounds silly, but it really invokes a feeling, invokes the energy you want to share. So just finishing off any little bits of branding. So think fonts, think imagery, think colors, think things like that. If there's any imagery that you need to very, very kindly ask a friend or a member of family to get their phone and take some pictures, we find out that, or also a tripod is great. If you don't have anyone else to take pictures for you, tripod's great. You can even get like a little Bluetooth clicker as well. So just think about it. You don't have to do it just yet, but maybe think about any imagery that would suit your brand and things like that. Just finishing that branding vision board, but with the color palette and the fonts and things like that. So it's something that you can begin to action going forwards. Does that make sense? You might also want to look
Uh-huh.
up different logos on social media, not social media, on Pinterest. You might want to look up different logos. Again, this is something if you are finding challenging, you can get someone to do for you. I can always recommend some good branding people if you're finding like it's just not the way your brain works, but you can also do this yourself. It's not hard to do yourself, and a lot of people do it themselves and create really, really beautiful brands. So do know that you do not need someone. Only if you're not finding it fun and you want someone else to do it, you can. Yeah. That's my only bit of homework is to finish off those. Okay. That's all from me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week. I believe we're talking about marketing in more depth next week. Okay. Enjoy your weekend, guys.
Thank you. Have
Bye.
a
See you
great
later.
night.